morning, Warsaw. Today is Thursday, 10th of August. There will be intermittent clouds in the sky with highs of 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit for our American listeners. Sunrise will be at 5:26 a.m. and sunset at 8:28 p.m. We are on the 10th day of the Warsaw Uprising. There are ultimatums made today, and we will learn more later, but what else is going on?
Well, on the 10th of August, the Germans give an ultimatum to the Warsaw citizens to do this. I mean, they drop leaflets by aircraft overhead, and they tell them that the population has to leave Warsaw, and they have to wave white handkerchiefs in their hands so that they know that they are complying with this demand. And not that many white handkerchiefs exist in Warsaw, this city of complete destruction at the point. The German High Command then says that they will guarantee that anyone leaving with their white handkerchiefs won't be harmed, and all of the men and women who are fit to work will get a job and they will get food. Those unable to work are going to be accommodated, they're told, in the western areas of the Warsaw Governorate, and they will also be given provisions. At this point, the Warsaw residents, they absolutely distrust the Germans. There's no way they think that a leaflet dropped from an airplane is going to secure their safety if they do comply. They're told that the elderly and the sick, women and children who need care, will receive medical care and a room. I mean, it seems absolutely impossible. And they're told that the Polish population must know, the Germans say, that the German army is only fighting against the Bolsheviks and not against them. I mean, this is just insulting after the massacres in Wola and Ochota, to be told that this is not a war against them, that they are purely collateral damage, that they're fighting the Soviets, is absolutely appalling. And of course, Warsaw, Poland, has been under the most brutal occupation for 5 years already. Of course they are fighting them. And then they're given a deadline for this ultimatum. So if they don't take part, if they don't come out and make their way through the city with their white handkerchiefs, they will be seen as legitimate targets.
I think that there's a point to be made here that people under, in extreme duress, if you like, and extreme sort of desperate situations, are prone to sort of grab onto any however fraudulent, any sort of offer of sanctuary that they're given. So I think the idea that these would have been laughed at, I mean, some people might have laughed at that, and then others, of course, would have agonized further and said, well, there are various caveats, of course, and of course they're fighting us, and all of that very, very rational, the very rational arguments that you've just given. But at the same time, people in desperate straits will cling on to anything that's given to them. And I think to some extent, I'd be very interested to know how many people did comply, because I think it would be a sizable number, because in these desperate straits they'll cling on to anything, and they're being promised, fair treatment, evacuation. Of course, they know what the history is, but in extremis they're being offered a way out, and I think there would be many who would have given that at least serious consideration.
I think you're absolutely right to mention it, and serious consideration, absolutely. But I do also think there is absolute fundamental distrust of the Nazi German authorities in Poland at this point. I mean, if you look at the conditions of the occupation, if you look at the mass roundups of people to be deported for labour, but also to be held as hostages against the Polish resistance, executing or assassinating any German occupational authorities. And it gets to the point where Hans Frank, who was the head of the general government zone, is saying there aren't enough trees in the forests of Poland to be chopped down, to be turned into paper, so that we can write the names of the number of people we are going to execute if you rise up against us. And they at one point, Frank says, we will kill not one person for every one German who's killed, not 10. We will execute 100 people. And they did this. So there is supreme lack of trust for them upholding or honouring any terms like this that are drop down their leaflets over the city. But also there has been this determination to fight. It's 2 weeks in. It's not quite the end of 2 weeks. They thought they would hold out. They committed to hold out for that period. I think there's also a sense that this might be a sign of weakness on the German side, that they are now calling for this. And so potentially this is even encouraging. And also there is still this sense from the Poles that we've had very little support yet from the Western allies, and they are holding out. They still think there is going to be significant airdrops of supplies. So it's all of these things in the mix, of course.
Claire, you just took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to mention we are on day 10. This uprising is only supposed to last a couple of weeks. And what's really interesting that we haven't had a chance to mention is that the Home Army High Command sent out a group of people that would go from cellar to cellar, home to home, amongst all the different civilians. And they would provide them with a questionnaire on how are they doing, what is their morale like, what are the conditions that they're living in, so they could keep a documentation of what was actually happening during the uprising. As we know, and we spoke about in episode 1, it was a euphoric moment for these people. They could hang out their flags. They could finally be free. They could go out into the street without the fear of a roundup or an execution or being deported. They had their moment of freedom. Now, by day 10, obviously, we know that's completely changed. We have a lack of medical supplies. The conditions in the city are unimaginable. You mentioned before, Claire, that there were blue bottle flies everywhere. We have people that have been buried in buildings that can't be retrieved, for example. There's a lack of water. There's a lack of hygiene. People haven't bathed in more than a week at this stage. And as you said, Claire, they're waiting and holding out for the allies to help them. We have airdrops, but are they enough to make an actual difference? Is this help going to actually come? Sticking to this idea of morale, food, conditions within the city, Claire, with a lack of food, how are the insurgents managing to get hold of anything?
Well, it is happening, which is excellent. And it was actually on this day, on the 10th, that they captured another part of the Hammerbush brewery, another site. It's actually on their warehouses that bordered the Jewish ghetto, so quite central in the city. And it's actually an amazing story behind this, because the Shia family, Alexander and his wife Sophia, had, because this part of the brewery was connecting with the wall of the ghetto, they had actually helped to get a number of Jews, Polish Jews, that helped smuggle them out of the ghetto in various ways, and had hidden them in this factory building, which is now taken by the resistance. They, like Sophia Franio, actually, they were actually later awarded the Righteous Among Nations medal. And unfortunately, their son, they were incredibly committed to this cause. Their 19-year-old son, Jerzy, was arrested in 1943, and he was sent to Pawiak prison, where the conditions were absolutely appalling, and he was eventually executed for his role in the resistance. So these are really committed resistance fighters. And now the Home Army manages to take another part of their site, and that means that there is more grain, more sugar, which can be distributed to the field hospitals across the city for civilian use as well as for the Home Army. Although now, because there's been so much bombing, when Zoe goes with her women's groups with their sacks to go and collect some of this and deliver it across the city, they find they have to sieve it, because it's actually full now of, the grain. The storage buildings have been bombed. They're open to the elements, so they're full of dirt, dust, bits of shrapnel, bits of metal, brick dust, bits of walls. So it's pretty grim, but it is quite an important new source of nutrients for the city.
Well, this is it really, isn't it? The insurgents can't really survive without a food source and water and the basic provisions that they'll actually need to be able to function. However, the Germans are getting a steady supply of their own weapons and food and ammunition. But what else are they up to, Roger?
So on the ground, it's largely a case of, as you were, the Germans are still resisting and pushing back that initial push by the insurgents. They're regaining some territory already, but so they're making fairly slow progress. The Kaminsky group, for example, is still fighting in Ochota, and German sappers are still trying to break through the various barricades that are set up around the city. One addition to the scenario on day 10 of the Rising is that the Germans bring in an armoured train, which is stationed to the north of the city, up beyond the ghetto, the former ghetto. Armoured trains is something that had actually featured very strongly in the battle for Poland in September 1939, and on both sides had armoured trains in that conflict, and it was something that then sort of to a large extent sort of faded from use in the rest of World War II, being much more mobile in general. But in this particular scenario in Warsaw, it obviously was considered a suitable battlefield in which to reintroduce the armoured train. So the armoured trains came in. They had artillery units on them. They were themselves, protected from artillery fire. They were more or less self-sufficient with their own magazines and their own crews and so on. So it could be a formidable weapon when used in the right circumstances. And they're brought into Warsaw on this day to assist in trying to beat back the insurgent advances. But the battle is still, far from won. And there's a very interesting diary entry from Erich von den Bach, who's the SS commander on site on the day, where he says that the bloody fights in Warsaw will last for a long time. So it's clear that this is, the battle is still in the balance on the 10th of August.
So that's the end of day 10. Thank you so much for listening in today. Just a reminder, we do have on our social media more testimonies if you're interested. It's just we don't want to overdo on too many testimonies for you all and overcrowd the narrative of what we're trying to achieve here. So do head to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or now what it's called as X, and you'll be able to listen to some more. Also, if you are listening and you do enjoy our podcast, please make sure to go and head to your favorite listening platform. So Spotify, Apple, Audible, any of those, and give us a 5-star rating. That means more people will be able to see the podcast and be able to enjoy it as much as you do. Thanks so much, guys. We will see you tomorrow for day 11.